I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Craig. Mrs. Fields. Here. Mr. Hyden. Here. Mr. Russ.
Here.
Ms. Ramzan.
Here.
Mrs. Steele. Here. Mrs. Hall. Here. Mrs. Levy. Here. Mr. D'Agostino.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of the Act, the Sussex Wantage Regional School District Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the school building and notice of said meeting sent to the New Jersey Herald and the Star Ledger.
The Sussex Wantage Regional School District is a responsive, caring, child-centered community. Our mission is to educate each individual to become a competent, lifelong learner and productive, responsible citizen by providing challenging opportunities in a safe environment for a partnership with families, schools, and communities.
All right, at this time, I believe we were going to move into executive session. Can I have a resolution, please?
Whereas pursuant to NJSA 10-4-12B, the Sussex Wantage Regional Board of Education may exclude the public from that portion of the public meeting at which the board discusses any of the matters described at NJSA 10-4-12B 1-9. Now therefore be resolved that the Sussex Wantage Regional Board of Education shall enter into closed session to discuss personnel and budget matters. Personnel only. Now therefore be further resolved by the Sussex Wantage Regional Board of Education that pursuant to NJSA 10-4-13B, the time, when, and the circumstances under which the discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public when the need for confidentiality and order exists.
Or we'll be in executive session for about 20 minutes. Can I looking for a motion, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, I'd just like to make a motion to reopen public session. All right, no, look for a motion. Can I get a second, please? All in favor? Aye. Just want to let you guys know, too, we're going to be going into an executive session at the end of the meeting. No action will be taken, but it's not on the agenda. It has nothing to do with the agenda. With that being said, let's move on to the report of the superintendent.
So we're going to do a concise presentation on our budget this year. I'm going to ask Kyle and get that fired up. Just take a 2-second intermission there. So thank you for joining us tonight for a presentation of our 2019-2020 budget. I just want to review a couple topics with you tonight about the budget. Just talk a little bit about the goals I've had for the school year. Talk to you a little bit about instruction and program enhancements going forward. Some facility enhancements that we've already completed and that we anticipate completing in the future. Some safety and security items, and then I'll turn it over to Mrs. Riker, who'll talk about some specific budgetary items. So one of the goals that I had coming in that was aligned to the diligent work that the board and the community have done over the years in the strategic plan was to enhance student learning outcomes. And we said that one area in particular was student learning outcomes in math, and even more particular at Sussex Middle School. So I conducted a series of Let's Talk meetings, gathered data about the issue, talked to various experts in the area, and we've made some modifications in that in the immediate, one of them being a new math series that aligns vertically our math instruction from kindergarten through 8th grade, which wasn't necessarily happening in the future. We also brought on some consultants to push into our math instruction in the school rather than sending folks out. And we said that this was going to be kind of a multi-year phase-in. Is it just not realistic to, make large gains over a short period of time? Another one, enhance communication, transparency, and foster a customer service mindset. I've really strived, I don't know your take on this, but to communicate with stakeholders on an ongoing basis. There's a lot of things that happen publicly, a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. For Board of Education members, every Friday they get a weekly rundown of the day's events that the whole administration kind of collaborates on. In regard to faculty and staff, I'll go through protocols of my own where if we have an issue in the district, I'll meet with union officials and give them a heads up about the issue, and we've kind of collaborated. They do the same for me. You may be pleased with it, you may be not, but every time a squirrel goes on an electric power line, knocks out the power, there's a fox in the backyard, we've been sending out robocalls, email notifications, and sometimes you reflect on those to see, was the email better than the robocall? So we're trying to do our diligence with those things. And then behind the scenes, one of the things with the customer service mindset, I've tried to instill that in, from a top-down mentality, working with our administration first. In particular, as things arise, very often as a principal or a superintendent, you get a call from a parent or another stakeholder with a concern about something. And behind the scenes, I'll look into what folks are concerned about and then follow up with the issue and try to guide, if it's an issue with one of our personnel, we'll guide them in a positive way. Then I'll try to check in with, in the case of a parent with a concern, hey, how did your conversation with so-and-so go? Was it pleasant? Was it nice? Did you come to some common resolution? And again, let's talk meetings, which this is a conversational piece that I've been trying to go around and elicit information from, in particular, our personnel. Instruction and program enhancements. The district's really, not to my credit, but to the credit of the board, previous boards, really made strides in technology integration. As many of you know, we're one-to-one with 3rd through 8th grade Chromebooks. And there's a replacement phase to that. So as you're going through a challenging budget time, you're looking at, what can we operate more efficiently with, what do we really need? And as part of some of those Let's Talk meetings, one Let's Talk meeting focused with middle school students who were on the leadership councils of the school. And, I just sit around and pick their brains and, what do you guys need? And they're like, Mr. Ball, we're in 8th grade, and if you're going to follow the rule that the district's done before, where 6th graders, it's 3rd and 6th graders we purchase new Chromebooks for them, and then they rotate up for the next 3 years. Like, Mr. Boyle, you really need to get Chromebooks for those 6th graders. They've seen their life, so we put that in our budget. But we're trying to balance that with, I think at some point, at least my exposure to the district, there was a connotation at one juncture where, there's so much a shift to technology that there may have been the perception that you're losing kind of the traditional best practice. Teachers who've been doing this for 20 years know what they can do. So we're trying to balance those two things. Continue to facilitate that new Big Ideas math program. I'm not just saying that one math program is all, going to change everything, but, and that's certainly not the case, but it's something to build upon. And again, we're going to expand and push in hands-on professional development with a new math consultant, Mr. Sheehan, who I believe many, many years ago was a student at High Point, so I think grew up in this area. And expanding delivery response to intervention, that's a, Mrs. Walsh?
I had him in high school.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, so we got a lot of positive feedback on his initial stuff. And response to intervention, working with students who are experiencing challenges, so we have that we've had that for some time at large school, anticipate expanding that to Wantage School, and then working with Mr. Schwartz at the middle school to try to develop different tiers here. Facility enhancements, things that we completed this year that you may have not been exposed to, but were really turned out great. Sussex Middle School Auditorium Project. If you don't recall or you hadn't been exposed to it, there were wooden seating chairs that were tight. So we've gotten tremendous amount of positive feedback on the comfort level of these chairs. There's a little less chairs. I think it's like 30 less chairs than the wooden chairs that were there. so it is a little more, seating is a little more compacted when there's big events here. So we had a great turnout for a couple events here. The Sussex Middle School play and the Wantage School musical were held here, and it was, it became like standing room only in the back of, 10 people or so, so we had to bring out some extra folding chairs. Sussex Middle School Gymnasium project turned out really nice, to the credit of the former board administration. I came in as the project was underway. We're continuing to monitor it, in particular moisture levels in that room, so there's a little device in there that'll gauge the moisture, because it's a natural product and wood expands and contracts, and we're looking for it now this spring to expand and bring some small seams together. One of the initiatives of the in prior administration was boiler redundancy, so those projects have been completed. And those are just pictures there. Those are twin boilers at the Wantage School that control 3rd and 4th grade lane heat. Wantage School. Anticipated to occur this year facilities projects. This isn't in this year's budget. It was in last year's budget, but when you see bulldozers at the Lawrence School over the summer, you should know like what's happening and why that's happening. So these things take so long to plan that they'll break ground on it. I believe Mr. Zaitone, who did the Wantage School parking lot in the rear, I'll be working on that. But that's just a shot of what's been going on there and diligence of the board to repair that. Safety and security upgrades, I'm not going to expand on this in too much detail because, I think I talked about before how we try to balance, our security procedures. But please know that the diligence, again, previous boards, previous administrations, in my opinion, going above and beyond in hiring school security is a really positive impact here. And we're seeking to build upon that with some of their recommendations, some of our facility recommendations. Mr. Kronsky is our tech director, and he was in the back for a while. All 3 schools, we're going to try to enhance the PA systems. In particular, Wantage School and Middle School have been experiencing challenges throughout time, in particular my time here. So we'd like to do those. We submitted those in the budget and some enhancement to the Lawrence School, and then that's kind of like the framework with some behind-the-scenes hardware that we'll seek to expand on with some of our security add-on devices to try to integrate our emergency responses, so things like lockdown, shelters in place, basically to automate some of those processes. And specific budgetary items, Mrs. Riker's going to take over.
Well, this slide, I'm sure you're all aware of it, it was in the paper, but this year, in a phase-in over the next 6 years, our district is going to lose a substantial amount of state aid. This year, it was almost $500,000, so that made the budget process a difficult one.
So as you can imagine, Superintendent of the Board of Education, there's so many competing interests when you're putting in a budget into place. And I want to commend the board for really being reflective. And we thought about various stakeholder perceptions, they thought about taxpayers, they thought about personnel. And at the end of the day, they thought about the kids and the students. And you try to balance all that and come up with as good a product as you can. So unfortunately, it does, due to the reduction in state aid, it does impact us negatively. So overall, how we report it to the county office is a reduction of 20.5 full-time equivalent staff members. So there are 3 full-time staff members who are retiring, and in that regard, we're just not replacing them. Some of that is due to the diligence of our administration, Mr. Gregory, the new principal at the Wantage School, working with me much earlier in the school year, kind of identified that this could be a potential, and really worked on redesigning the schedule to try to absorb retirements. That's kind of been one of my thoughts going into any kind of challenging budget scenario. If you're able to absorb a retirement, it's mutually beneficial to the district and staff members. A reduction of 10 full-time equivalent TAs. So we actually didn't touch full-time teacher assistants in this district. That's translated to 18 part-time reductions, largely all hired this year, and 1 full-time retirement that we're not replacing. Reduction in 2 full-time administrators. Going back to my interview process with the Board of Education, one of the areas that I tried to kind of brainstorm with the board was the possibility of consolidating some administrative roles in the district. So that's submitted for their consideration. Reduction in technology staff hours by 0.5. That basically impacts an individual who has already reduced his or her own hours for seeking other opportunities. And some other certified staff reductions, which total 5, 2 at Sussex Middle School, 1 at West, and 2 at CEL.
So the next 3 slides are, if you've been here a long time, you see these every year. Something that slightly changed this year was due to the reduction in state aid. That usually was over 30% of our budget. It's now 27.8%. The local tax levy is 62.5%. We have surplus monies coming in the budget this year. We have utilization of capital reserve. We have a semi-reimbursement, which is a small amount of money, but we're required to budget that and go through that process because we have so many semi-qualified students in the district. And then the other ones are all about the same. We get transportation revenue for doing shared routes with High Point. Miscellaneous is the breakdown of that little square there. It's interest income. Actually, those three ones there make up that. The extraordinary, miscellaneous, and transportation all make up that there. The way the funds are distributed generally stay the same every year. The biggest part of our budget is regular instruction, followed very closely by employee benefits. And special ed instruction is 14.2% of the budget. Facilities is 7.5%. Student transportation 6.7%. And then we have a falling between 2% and 4% are all of the other ones. Your child study team, the capital outlay, the money that we are required to transfer to the charter school for the students that attend. It's school administration, general administration, the business office and technology, and extraordinary services, which is the related services that we provide in district for our students. The tentative budget that we presented was a 4.51% increase with some adjustments that came in from insurance. We've been able to bring that down, so it's 3.73% increase. These figures are on the school year tax levy. I know Mr. Gettler likes to look at it a different way.
I looked at my tax bill.
And again, this is the school year portion of your tax bill. There's many other portions that we have no control over that make it up. So these figures are just for the school year. So your overall tax bill won't equate to just these. But for Wantage Township, the average home assessed at $260,000. There's an overall 5.68% increase in tax, $13.91 per month, and $166.95 for the year. From 2018-19 budget to this one of the reasons that Wantage is seeing a bigger increase is the regional allocation changed, and that is the percentage of students from the borough or the Wantage Township that attend here. So as those enrollment figures change and shift, the portion of the tax bill shifts as well. So last year, Wantage was 88.81% of the overall enrollment, and this year it's 90.68%, so it's almost a 2% increase. The ratables increased, and the average home assessment decreased slightly. Sussex Borough has a corresponding decrease. Their average home is assessed at $179,000, almost $180,000, and they're seeing a decrease of 13.55% overall. So that's $27.89 per month, or $335, almost $335 per school year. Just as Wantage went up 1.87, the allocation for Sussex went down. It was 11.19 last year, and it's 9.32% of the student enrollment this year. Ratables also decreased, and the average home assessment slightly increased.
This time we'll move on to audience remarks. Members of the audience are invited to make brief comments about items on this agenda and matters of interest to the district.
Gather 98 Gimmer Road wanted. First, I know there is about $120,000 reduction in the tax. Obviously, our taxpayers are taxed out. We can't afford the proposed obscene now $567,295 tax increase. This board has to find some way to reduce its spending. As I believe I had previously mentioned, this year Wantage taxpayers being hit with a triple whammy. First, when the county published its 2019 equalization ratios, Wantage was at one extreme at minus 6.70%. Sussex Borough was at the other extreme at plus 6.15%. Second, when the New Jersey Department of Education issued its tax allocation tables, which Christina just covered, Sussex Wantage, based on the equalization student ratios, us Wantage taxpayers picked up another 1.875% share of the Sussex Wantage taxes. Wantage is now at 90.68%, which is just pristine. Then, if I'm reading your budget correctly, the state has cut Sussex Wantage's funding by $456,311, which disagrees with Christine's number, because there was another number where they increased it by 6,000. I incorporated that in my number. If I add the other two numbers, I come up with exactly what Christine said. Based on your proposed budget, average Wantage resident taxpayer, $260,000, is going to see a $100 tax increase for Sussex Wantage. Combined, we'll see about a $219 tax property tax increase this year. How many more people do you want to force out of Wantage Township? Your school isn't going to help the people that you are forcing out of their homes. It was probably 6 years ago that the state announced it was going to change its method of calculating its school funding. Since then, this board, I know there's a number of new members on the board, has totally failed to prepare for this known problem. Is now sticking us taxpayers with a $567,000 tax increase. Using numbers from Sussex Wantage's 2018 audit, you have 3 school buildings with a capacity of 1,737 students. In 2018, you were at about 60% of capacity. When are you going to shut down one of these 3 school buildings? From October 2001 to October 2018, the total reduction in enrollment is 698 students, or 39.44%. Again, based on your audit from 2009 to 2018, your student enrollment dropped 517 students, or 33.35%. But your employees only went down 12.22%, or 31.3%, and you've mentioned about that. In 2018, you had 1 employee for every 4.34 students. In 2018, you had a pupil-teacher ratio of 7.5 to 1. In 2013, it was 11.7 to 1. As a start, how do we get the ratio back to at least a 10 to 1 ratio? I know it's a few years since I attended school, but back then it was probably about 30 to 1. if not more, in the school I went to. If you're proposed to 2019 budget, you show a proposed reduction of salaries of teachers of a total of $273,977. How many teaching positions does this include? You presented that. Health benefit shows an $831,767 increase, or 19.43%. This appears to be totally out of line. Plus, if you're reducing salaries, won't you be reducing number of employees? Yes, you will. So that makes this 831,000 number suspect. I believe that the board must sharpen its pencils and then go back through this proposed budget line by line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gettler. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the presentation of agenda items.
Under personnel, I'd like to recommend item number 1.
I'll second. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Nuss?
Yes.
Mrs. Gregg? Mrs. Fields?
Yes.
Mr. Hyden?
Yes.
Mrs. Renzan?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
Yes.
Mrs. Stoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Liddy?
Yes.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Under finance, I'd like to move items 1, 2, and 3.
Looking for motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you. Looking for a second. Discussion? Any discussion?
I'm a little disappointed in the budget process. We met 2 or 3 times, discussed that we knew what was coming and that we needed to use Mr. Gettler's terminology, sharpen our pencils. We painstakingly asked for information on extracurricular activities. The discussion got to the point where we discussed, I know I put up, I said, take the ski club away, take the soccer team away because it's duplicated in the community. And the only thing that came from it was, there was a discussion where another board member said that, you know, if we could save all the other extracurriculars, we could, if we just remove the 8th grade trip, then we could save everything else. And then that whole discussion disappeared. 20.5 people, or the equivalent of, are losing their jobs in this budget. Taxpayers, the increased tax levy is 3.73%. I can't support this, I really can't. We had budget meetings and major discussions that we had just fell through the cracks.
I have to take a different approach to that, because when I met with them, we talked about the,
I'm discussing what went on in the budget meeting.
But at the end, when he said, let's
like,
take a
but we
vote,
met individually.
we all said, leave everything in, and you agreed to that.
I agreed, and the thing that I agreed to was when you said, we'll take the 8th grade trip out, that's what you said, to save all the rest of the
Right, but then you said take a
extracurricular
vote,
activities, we said, it was unanimous that we said take the 8th grade trip out.
and then he said take a vote, and then things changed.
I
Certain
don't,
people
not
said-
at the budget meeting, it did.
No, you were,
I wasn't the only one there.
no, I know, and I wasn't the only one there.
Anybody else see what I saw?
I agree with that. It was discussed. The only thing that was taken out was, well, there was one
Homework
thing
club.
taken out, but that was it.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when I sat down, because I wasn't at the budget committee meeting, you're correct, but I was made aware of it. When I sat down and went over the budget with Mr. Hall and Mrs. Riker, the 8th grade trip was already a part of this budget.
Okay.
There
Went
was
back
no
in
found
after
money.
the
It never
budget
came back
meeting,
out. It
where
never-
I
every-
know, it never
Never-
left the budget,
no, it
I'm
never
well aware of
did.
that, because I had several meetings with several people.
At the budget meeting, it was removed.
No, it
Okay,
wasn't.
well, if that was one
Unanimously.
meeting, that's,
Unanimously removed.
okay, well,
To-
if that
to
was
save-
one meeting.
To save, that was the last budget meeting.
But it wasn't,
It was to save every other extracurricular activity.
that's not every
And I-
board
we-
member.
But correct me if I'm wrong, we're not
I'm
losing any
I'm
extracurriculars, are
talking
we?
about we're losing one thing, and when we're losing 20.5 employees, and we're also putting an extra tax burden on everybody in town, I really think our due diligence was to go further. That's my personal opinion.
Well, it's been crystal clear, Bob, that you haven't wanted this trip for many, many
It's
years.
not
So
just the trip,
it's
Mrs.
been
Gray.
that way for a long, long time. But with that being said,
Do I have the floor?
I'd like to
Who
have-
has the floor?
I'd like to have a
Let's
conversation.
not talk over each other.
The past board also asked for a fundraising committee to support this trip in the years going forward. This coming Friday, you have an event going on that we have 300+ people coming to for next year's trip. You were given exactly what you wanted to support next year's
That
trip.
was prior
And
to
we
a
don't even know what's coming out of it.
almost $500,000 cut from state aid.
I'm well aware of the cuts. I knew about the
And
cuts 2
asking
years ago.
people to hold an extra burden on their back and asking kids to do with less and with staff members to lose their positions. It's my position, and that's, I'm not having a conversation, I'm just saying what my experience was.
Well, that's fair, then vote no.
I don't know if I
That's
can shed any light too on the notion of in particular the DC trip. You know, in my conversation with board members, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically there's a consensus that over the next several years, the projections for the state aid losses are significant here. And I would argue that there's pretty universal agreement, or at least an understanding, that things like the DC trip won't survive. We still want to provide kids with the best opportunity possible. Where I think there's disagreement, at least has been expressed to me, is the timing of when to dissolve that, right? So you have people on one extreme, and I think everybody's extraordinarily well-intentioned, looking at it from different angles, you know? On one extreme would say, you know, it should end now. On another extreme, kids who are in 6th grade, we should provide that trip for. The idea is that they've been here, they've participated to some degree in fundraising and things like that, and that at least it's been articulated to me that if you're coming up from 5th grade, well, you don't really know about it, you weren't participating in it, so is it reasonable that they dissolve it? In my opinion, and you know, I don't want it to be a cop-out, but I'm kind of in the middle of that idea. Whereas I see the projected reduction, the full extent of which next year, I don't know if you'll be able to provide that. But then again, you have people well-intentioned who say, well, we've been doing a lot of diligence here to get kids on board for it, reduce the funding for next year. So, I mean, I can see all sides of it. And again, you know, for the audience, I wouldn't criticize anybody up here for their personal take on it. They're all coming, I know them pretty well personally, and they're all coming from it. They may disagree, but they're coming at it from a point of, you know, they just care passionately about whatever the scenario is. Just disagree.
And I'll keep for Richard. And I'm sure everybody knows how I feel. I think it should be terminated, it should be done, because that's a lot of money, and we can buy Chromebooks for our kids, we can do other things, keeping extracurricular activities in.
We have the Chromebooks in there still.
I'm just using it as an
And the
example,
extracurriculars.
but there's other educational things that we can use for our children. That's what we're here to do, is educate our children. To go to the Washington DC is a fabulous trip, I'm sure, but what are the kids getting out of it? They run around, as far as I know, they're not made to come back and do a report or tell about it, speak about it. You know, our trips are supposed to be educational, and
It is educational.
You're going to
it
the
is.
My daughter
nation's
came back
capital.
But
and
it
wanted
is.
to go back in the summer.
but and it is, I understand that, but to me, all that fundraising, take it to the next year and go on a trip that the whole class can go to. Because there's some students that they don't like to go over an overnight trip. They don't like, you know, the parents may not want them to go. They don't want to go for whatever.
And it's been expressed to me that there's a lot of kids that'll never see the outside of this town without the Washington trip.
And that's
So I think
fine.
it's,
You know what?
I-
I grew up in this town. I didn't do it until I got older.
I will concur with you, and I had this conversation specifically with Mr. Gall and Mrs. Riker. In light of what we're facing over the next 6 years, which is cataclysmic, I think it's going to gut our schools. I find it deplorable. I recommend everybody goes to Trenton and fight this. That is what I've been telling everybody that comes to my doorstep. With that being said, this has been an issue for multiple years. And I think to slap these people in the face, and yes, I'm not involved in it anymore. To slap these people in the face that are working, we actually have advertised Friday night's events for the PTO and the trip, I concur with you. I'm in agreement with you that this is going to morph. I concede. But to take it away from the kids that have been invested in fundraising for this activity, cut it off at sixth grade. The incoming
No.
sixth graders, we cut it.
No.
And that's fine, and you vote no. You're not gonna get that vote from me because those kids and parents have been dedicated and driven to give you exactly what you asked for. You asked for fundraising, you asked to bring the trip down, and that's what we've done.
And I agree, but,
So,
But-
and again,
but
you vote your
things
conscience,
change.
I'm gonna vote mine.
right, and things change, and people, you
You're
know,
right.
those children have to understand that their parents now have to spend another $30 a month in taxes or whatever it is. Some parents struggle now, and they're too proud to come forward and say, I need help, I need this, I need that. So what's more important, my child, that 8th grade trip, or my child having whatever they need?
Again, you vote your conscience, I'll vote mine, I have to disagree.
I just want to be, I want to make sure I'm understanding this clear. If we put the money in the budget, right, for the class trip, technically it's going to come out in the agenda at the time that we're going to vote on it. And the people, if there's an issue in the community that the community feels they don't want it, they're going to have the option to come and voice their opinion, and us as the board are going to be able to hear that.
Well,
It doesn't mean that we're gonna have the class trip.
But
This
it
money.
doesn't go on the agenda.
Yeah, it does.
trip.
As an
Oh,
actual
yes,
board
it does.
agenda.
That'll go for
Agenda.
next year.
All this
Correct.
is
And
saying
all we're
is that
saying
the
is
money's
put it
in the budget.
Because what's gonna
I
happen,
understand.
well, my point is, we know what's gonna happen with the 7th graders. We know they're going to fight it. We know they're going to petition it. It's like we went through hell. So why not put the money in the budget? It's gonna get advertised to the public that we're gonna vote on it. And at that time, let the community decide. If they're truly upset about it and they wanna come out and voice their opinion, they'll fill the seats. Or, if they don't, the money's in the budget and we know we're weeding it down at a certain time. If you look out 10 years and say it's $20,000, $200,000, we will be we know we're making a savings in the long run. I agree that there's, the kids that are here, I honestly don't, what it took from us as a board to hear these kids for an entire year, took away from so much other work that we could have been doing. And they have the right to feel that way. We can't stop them from voicing their opinion. But it absorbs so much other valuable time. So what I'm saying is, we still have a chance if the community is upset and doesn't think we should spend it, to let them voice their opinion at the time. Like, we're not gonna try and sneak it in, people are gonna be watching to know when it's time for the class trip. Let the community speak at that time. I don't know, that's how I feel.
I would agree with you, Mr. Nussin, that this
I think
community and this
that's
board's never gonna let me sneak anything in anyway.
Yeah, good luck with that.
The public doesn't know
I
anything
agree.
you do.
No,
Be
but once the
honest
Washington
about it.
trip comes out, there'll be droves of people.
No, there's
I
not.
agree with you, I think that's a
Most
Most
valid
of the
idea.
public
I
don't
think
get
that's
the
a very valid
newspaper,
idea.
they don't do anything. How many are here? How many went to High Point? How many went to the county? Nobody. The former mayor of Lafayette got up at the county. He says, I'm not blaming you folks. He turns around, where is the taxpayers?
And, Mr.
Nobody knows about it.
We do make efforts, though, now we're videotaping the meetings, we try our best to get the message out to the community, so if they
It
decide
gets
not to
to
show up.
about,
If they decide not to show up or not watch, that's on them, not on the board. I personally feel like I've been to the fundraisers and the community rallying around the field trip has been spectacular. And to take it away from 6th and 7th graders, and again, now we're talking about next year, it might be a different board next year, it might be more money we lose from the state next year that we don't know. We can't say for sure the 6th graders are going on the trip, but in my mind, to have them put all that effort in and then take it away from them is wrong. And I know it's $20,000 approximately, and that could bring back a part-timer or something, but I think the experience they get on that trip is invaluable.
Listen to the words you just said. They put an effort into everything they do. What about our administrators? What about our teachers? What about anyone that works in our school, TAs? They put so much of an effort and dedicate their lives to our students.
Absolutely.
And we're getting, I don't want to say it, we're letting go 20.5 of our people.
Absolutely.
That's heartbreaking. I mean,
It is.
it is. I mean, I know, I've been in their shoes where I walked in my door, my job, and out the door I went the same day.
Right.
No notice, no nothing. And it's heartbreaking. And if I could save somebody, it's better than hurting kids' feelings. I love kids. I grew up here. I went to school here. My kids, my grandchildren come here. But reality is reality. And you just can't keep, I cannot keep supporting something that when we're displacing people from their jobs. I just can't.
But still,
I have,
Well, does
Yes,
that go
one
to
more
say for
thing
the
that
sports
Mr.
then?
Hyden-
Do you wanna get rid of all the sports at that point?
No,
Because
because-
then we could be displacing for sports.
Mr. Hyden would like to.
Okay,
we
sorry.
wanted to, that was the initial conversation, was that we were going to look to cut other things. And that's how the conversation, from
I'm
what I
aware.
remember went down, we were picking and choosing what extracurriculars, we asked for information to come back to the board on what was spent and what the participation rates were in each one of those things, and whether it touched one school, two schools, 3 grades, 1 grade, 1 kid, 2 kids, and tried to make educated decisions. And the conversation was, we were picking things, and then somebody, Mrs. Ranzan, said that we should save every other extracurricular activity and get rid of the 8th grade trip, and
That really
that's,
wasn't what I said, though. I said that you.
that's what I heard you say. Is that what you heard her say?
Well, you can,
Because we don't need a-
you can get everybody on this board against me, but what I said was that you wanted to cut every extracurricular, and I
I
said
didn't
that.
want to cut every extracurricular. I only wanted to
Well,
cut
I
what
let you
ones
speak,
were
now
not
you
being.
won't let
Well,
me speak.
Guys,
Okay.
ultimately, it's a board decision, the budget,
Yep.
and
I
understand.
apologize.
I understand your frustration with the budget committee, Mr. Hyden, but that's the past, and we're all gonna vote based on this budget, and, yes, Mrs. Craig.
Well, and in support of what Bob's saying, I hear you about the extracurriculars, and if you remember, back in 2011, when we sat together and Chris Christie came in and stripped our budgets, we actually went down the sports role, and what we did was we actually called every sending district to see if they were gonna be supporting a team to play against ours, so it was an even fair cut of field hockey, because none of the sending districts had field hockey. So if you took that approach in the budget meeting to find out if somebody's fielding basketball or field hockey or soccer for that matter, then that's a fair approach to the extracurriculars.
Well, we were-
To sit and pick and choose
It
is
wasn't-
absolutely obscene,
sports is-
because that's like shooting
sports
ducks
is-
in a barrel.
Sports is a very small part of it.
It
and
really isn't. If you looked at our budget numbers, there was $10,000 actually up for one of our sports. Volleyball was absolutely astronomical.
What we did was what was being used in our district. That was the discussion we had, what the children's use were, whether it reached out to all the kids, whether everybody was available to it. And that's the guideline we used this time. And to your credit and to the credit back then of the board, we did a lot of cutting of extracurricular activities to save jobs and to cut taxes. And this board didn't do that. That's my feeling. I saw what both did, and
And again, I'm in
Disappointed.
concurrence with you, but we could have then, when we sat for that budget meeting, it could have been a board discussion where we said, let's look at soccer, let's look at basketball, because we did do that 7 years ago or 8 years ago. It's great to bring it to the kids, but if the kids are playing field hockey and don't have another field hockey team to play, you're really not giving the kids anything, which we sat through. You and I experienced that together on the board before.
And that's-
And field hockey went right out the door because nobody else fielded a field hockey team. So at that point, you're not bringing anything to the kids other than heartbreak that they get to run around the SMS field and go play no games. So we sat and we made heartbreaking, gut-wrenching decisions. If you remember, in the Wantage School, 26 staff members got cut that day. People left that room in tears. It was the worst meeting I've ever seen in my life. But we made a bigger decision. I agree with you. Let's look at the sports. If no other place is fielding a field hockey team, guess what? We don't need a field
But
hockey
it
team.
wasn't just the sports, it was also
I'm just talking about the
extracurricular
sports.
and the fall, the play, getting rid of the play, and I said that there are
And I
kids
don't agree
here
with getting rid
that
of the
come
play.
here just for the play, just for playing volleyball, that they come here for those extracurricular. And we don't just educate kids academically, we educate them socially, emotionally, and that's important. That's what I said in that meeting.
And I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And when it comes to all of those other things, we're also trying to rebrand. So how do you rebrand? By cutting everything. We have to have a pull here that makes us, we went through this again on the board before, we were gonna put out postcards, like the charter school does, so that we could redraw the people back to our school for all the amazing things we're doing. We've been through this. You and I
just
sat
think-
through this.
I just think that we are looking too much into this. We're asking to just put the money in the budget.
Agreed.
We're still going to have the ability to vote no if you don't want to vote at the time that it comes up for discussion.
I agree.
And I think we're all missing that point. You can vote no at that time. And if we have to do something
Agreed.
out loud and say, well, when are we gonna discuss it? Like, why don't we give it like a 3 months notice, I don't know, 2 months notice to the public that we have an important discussion to be made, not last minute, but, you know, I don't know. I just think we're not spending the money now. We're just budgeting in it, and I think the public should know it's a short-term commitment that we're making that is going to most likely end, and we might not be able to go to the 6:30. It just physically might not be able to do.
But it leaves it on the table is what you're saying, to have a discussion.
All right, guys.
How many years have we had the eighth grade group?
2011.
Yes, this is what, eighth
Okay,
day.
and everybody seems to say this is such an educational thing. Well, the children that didn't have the opportunity to go in it before, are they less educated? No. Same education, same teachers. Why are we letting teachers go? Our basic deal is to educate, not to put them on a trip, to educate them. They want to go on a trip, there's vacations with the parents to take them on trips, without spending our money. Let's talk. Everybody doesn't turn your head.
Please do.
It's very unlikely to be able to sit there. With what Georgianne just said, and it came up a couple of times, I think Mr. Gatler, and the teachers are gonna hate me for this, but Mr. Gatler said, you know, the ratio of adults to children is getting a little unbalanced there. So, and 20,000 here or there is not going to bring back the people we had to let go, okay? That's one thing. As far as the tripping educational, I mean, it's like this. I think that I was educated quite well before Chromebooks came around too, but that's an opinion, you know. Yeah, you know. Another thing here is that I think that the board, as our intention, has to be an immediate as to, you know, we keep it in the budget, and if it happens, it happens, if it doesn't, it doesn't. Either way, I believe that the board superintendent, whoever makes this plan or whatever, lets the intention known that no matter what, after the 6th grade class, these incoming 5th graders are not going to have an 8th grade class trip. It has to be changed immediately to the 8th grade Washington class trip. The Washington part has to be taken off. Fundraising can still be done. It has to be 8th grade class trip. And it has to be known yesterday
Right.
that the
Agreed.
incoming
Right.
5th graders cannot do that.
Very
Right.
great
We
point.
hope-
Amazing.
I hope that we can say that it's in our intentions to keep it in the budget. We're not gonna know anything until Christina gets numbers a year from now, as far as that goes, all right? But the intentions of it definitely being gone, that we will have an 8th grade class trip. It will be great. I'm not sure what it's gonna be yet, okay? But we got time to figure that out. Let them continue fundraising, but let them know that the whole Washington thing is off the table as of the incoming 5th graders. I was a parent the last, I don't know how long it was, but it felt like forever, forever. And unfortunately, the taxpayers, the ones who pay the bills, did not come out, but the kids did. The kids did. And they're validated in the point that I went to a lot of the fundraisers that they had, and I'm not sure why. I mean, group of kids do different things, but for instance, at the basketball games, there were actually a lot of sixth graders that were playing against the teachers as opposed to eighth graders. So I definitely feel as though because of budget cuts and all the controversy and the problems that it's caused, it needs to have an end, but it needs to be phased out. I can promise you, I mean, I'm sure at least probably half of you, maybe half of you that were here during that time. And it took up a lot of the board's time. It was horrible. It was horrible. And it made me think, is this really what the board does before I even ran? And now I'm here and I realize that no, that's not really what the board needs to be worrying about. There's a lot more bigger issues that go on. So you do have to make that balance. You have to find a fairness. But again, I swear, they need to know as of yesterday.
That's critical.
agree with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Could I possibly interject something?
Please.
I'll go back to something I've already said tonight.
Are you gonna, just a second, Mr. Geller, or is it gonna be a while? Because we have another public comment section coming up too, if you would wait. Is that okay?
But I might give you an out.
I don't know.
You're talking about reducing staff. I brought up the fact health benefits shows an increase of 831,000. That's a big hunk of change.
It is.
If that number,
That is one of the numbers that has been adjusted in the revised budget.
okay, I'm working off of the
Right.
budget I have. This is why I'm bringing, because there's a lot of money there which possibly could solve your problem if, but
Thank you, Mr. Geller. I mean, if everybody's good, we'll go forward with a vote. This whole situation is very difficult. 20.5 full-time employees, the equivalent, and this is had this discussion because of the state cutting so much funding. So as it was alluded to before, please contact Trenton and talk to your representatives and try to tell them that this is gutting our schools. I'd like to thank Christina Reicher for her hard work as well as Mike Gall on the budget. I'd like to thank the faculty and staff and the community for understanding what we have to do as a board. And I'd certainly like to thank the board because this is something that they take very seriously, have put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of discussion, and we don't always agree, but I do believe that all of us have the best intentions for this community wholeheartedly. So if nobody else has anything to say, let's do a roll call, please.
Am I still alive?
Well, I don't know, is it gonna be a while?
No, I don't, I'd like to kind of ask Bob, and this is why I wish that we were able to be together more often. There was a lot of talk with the 8th grade class trip and extracurriculars. Without going into specifics, do you feel that there was anything else possibly with the budget that could have been done differently? Or is that like we're talking about like the class trip and bringing, we're losing
I think
teachers.
we could have reduced several extracurricular activities. And maybe saved even if we saved 0.5 of somebody who provides a service to a kid that they're no longer going to get, brings a job to somebody in town. Maybe it's just a couple of cents tax relief. We have to really sharpen our pencils, and I really don't think we did. It's my opinion. And
But do you feel that there were other places also, as opposed to just like extracurricular activities type things? Or?
I think there's other places where we could have saved money.
Yeah, as opposed to just like under the extracurricular.
We discussed several things with staffing and things such as that we're doing. yeah, we've discussed several different options. I think we're really.
Sorry, Mr. Rad. Thank you. Yes, please roll call. Nobody else.
Mrs. Ramzan?
Yes.
Mrs. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Fields?
Well, reluctantly, I'll say yes. I'm not happy about that E3 trip, but I'll deal with that later.
Mr. Hyden?
No.
Mr. Nuss?
Yes.
Mrs. Steele?
No.
Mrs. Stahl?
No.
Mrs. Whitney?
No.
Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, at this time, we'll move on to audience remarks. Members of the audience are invited to make brief comments about items on this agenda and matters of interest to the district.
Sharon Chidal Wantage. Thank you, Mrs. Whitty, for clearing that up, because I swore to God as I sat there as having senior moments. I have to agree. If you're gonna have this trip, one of my fears is that you're gonna keep saying, okay, but we did the fundraising, so they have to have the trip. That's not gonna be fair. So you are gonna have to say, yesterday, the trip stops here. And the way that it's being presented, I think the public, the taxpayer, is gonna get very, very confused about this. So, and as far as extracurriculum activities are concerned with sports, it wouldn't be the first time that we had to pay to play. And that is one of your options. We've done it up at High Point High School. We even had to have the seniors who are driving to school pay for parking. And this is the way we generated income. So these are all things that you can be looking at if you want to keep your extracurriculum sports, which some are being duplicated by our rec departments, because our programs are important. And our programs did get cut. I know that a lot of people are just looking at it as aides or teachers, but these were programs that were run by teachers. And some of the aides, well, all of the aides, a student just lost somebody very important to them that was essential, not only for their academic, but their social and their emotional learning too, Mrs. Ranzan. So let's take that into consideration. When we have to weigh our options, are the sports that important? And if they are, find a way to pay for it. And parents will pay to play. I have 4 kids. I have a low income, and I found the money. Everyone can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zucher. Is there anyone else?
Amber Simons, Wantage. I think this whole 8th grade trip has been out of control for a couple of years now, but I think we all know why. First of all, I don't remember this board, when I was on it, ever asking for fundraising. It was something that was brought to the board. And what I do remember what happened was that there was a board member here that orchestrated a plan that included harassing the board and accusing them of being bigots and racists and trying to bully them into keeping the trip. In addition, had a bunch of students, many of which were extremely disrespectful, come to the meeting. Some were very respectful, but I have to say, if my kids ever spoke the way some of those kids spoke, and I know other board members here had the same opinion, ever spoke the way that they did, my kids they'd have me to answer to, let me tell you. Anyway, it was absurd. The district can't afford to pay for all these kids to go. We're not a travel agency, and the cost of the trip is still the same for the district. The district still has to pay for the kids that can't afford to go. The only thing that the fundraising helps are the parents who actually pay out of their pockets, which is great. The trip was a couple $100 cheaper this year. And the fundraising and the volunteers for fundraising, that's not something that's guaranteed. So, I mean, I have 2 kids. I have one in 8th grade, and I have one in 5th grade. And my 8th grader's ecstatic. He can't wait to go. He's going in 2 weeks. I'm excited for him. But I really, I have another son in 5th grade, he's coming up here next year, and I honestly could care less whether he goes or not. It's not the school's responsibility to send my kid on a trip. And you get what you get, and you don't get upset. And if Brody doesn't get to go on the trip, Brody doesn't get to go on the trip. He's certainly not gonna show up here with a bunch of his friends crying and tearing all the board members to shreds and accusing them of things that aren't true. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Simons. Does anyone else have any remarks?
Mrs. Moss asked me to address you on behalf of the association tonight. It is very hard to sit and listen and not be conflicted on many levels. As a taxpayer, as a resident, as a lifelong resident, as a parent, as a grandparent, and as an employee in the system. It's hard not to be conflicted on many levels. And I feel your conflict because I feel like so many of you share the same burdens that we do. But what we would like to tell you tonight is that we appreciate your sensitivity, we appreciate your consideration, we appreciate your heartfelt efforts. Everybody doesn't always agree, but I believe that everybody has in their heart to do what they see is best in their own minds, and we want to thank you for that. We want you to know that we consider us to be a part of this. We want to be a solution. We don't want to be a clog in the wheel. We appreciate your sensitivity. I survived the Christie cuts. I was very much involved, and it was a very difficult time when I tell you that I literally lived with a bottle of Tums. Being on executive committee and having to be a party to some of the decisions that were made, it's one of the most heart-wrenching, difficult things. I would like to tell you that I think we're out of the woods, but I don't think we are. I think we will very possibly be here again next year, and it will be even harder. But if we all keep in mind that our hearts are to the right place, and that's to do what's best for our kids, we'll make it through. That's what community does. And I want to just say thank you for all of your efforts and all of your considerations. Mr. Gettler, I love you. I do. I know. I don't hate you people. I do. Every time you say go away with the building, my heart crunches. Come spend a day with me and see that we really don't have empty rooms or places that we can really give up a building yet. Come, I'll show you. I will. I'll even let you play with my kids.
I'll take you to lunch, too.
The association.
Thank you, Mrs. Gomez.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, at this time, we're going to move into executive session. No action will be taken. Can I get a resolution, please, Mr. Director?
Whereas pursuant to NJSA 10-4-12B, the Sussex Wantage Regional Board of Education may exclude the public from that portion of a public meeting at which the board discusses any of the matters described in NJSA 10-4-12B 1 through 9. Now therefore be it resolved that the Sussex Wantage Regional Board of Education shall enter into closed session to discuss superintendent contract. Now therefore be it further resolved by the Sussex Wantage Regional Board of Education that pursuant to NJSA 10-4-13B, the time when and the circumstances under which the discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public is when the need for confidentiality no longer exists.
All right, we will be in executive session for approximately 30 minutes. Looking for a motion?
No action.
No, if no action will be taken.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I'm sorry, who first did?
Public session?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Oh my goodness.
Aye. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
I-
Second.
All